when things wrap around in our head all the time and it's not something we write down, it can play mind games with us. I mean, talk about bumping up your mental game, right? It's why journaling can be so useful, because when you take what's in your head and you put it in your hand, you can really begin to evaluate like, oh, is what I'm thinking in my head reasonable? Oh my gosh, this is the most unreasonable thing on the planet.
Welcome to the Spartan DEKA Series on Spartan Up with Jarod, Cogswell, Director of Sport, and Yancy, Culp, Director of Programming.
In the next 4 weeks, we're going to address overall well-being with a variety of topics that will unlock those doors holding us back in our minds. And as we've stated before, we are athletes in this game called life, and our focus is now on winning the head game.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Gone Rogue High Protein Chips. Visit Amazon or GoneRogueSnacks.com and use the promo code Spartan25 to get 25% off.
What's up, Spartans? Welcome to the DEKA Series on the Spartan Up Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jarod Cogswell, along with my brother, Yancy Culp. And today, everyone, we are going to be addressing mental conditioning. Yeah, that's right. We're going to stop talking just about fitness, but we're going to be talking about mindset for the next 4 weeks. And everybody, mental health has become a major global concern due to the pandemic, even more so than before. And it's affected all ages and populations. Schools closed, lost jobs, lost social connections, excessive eating, alcohol, substance abuse is just skyrocketing, right? And all of this has resulted in higher rates of depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and overall poor health. And I'm not just talking about the physical, I'm talking about the mental and the emotional. And in our recent 5-part series called The Life Fueled by Fitness, our mission was to help those on the roller coaster ride of fitness. Those people that are stopping and starting. Well, that happens even with the mind. As fitness coaches, Yancy and I have worked with many, many clients of all levels of fitness over the years. And there's this thing called motivation, which we view as a roller coaster ride. And there's no better person to talk to than Dr. Lara Pence. And I'm going to let Yancy do the introduction because he's got a little story for Dr. L or a story to share. So, Yancy, are you ready to rock and roll for today's episode?
Listen, man, we've got licensed clinical doctor of psychology, Dr. L, on the show. I got to tell you, first off, I want to give you a quick story on today when I call her and we're talking about, a few of the details, and she answers and she's like a 160 heart rate. She's out running up and down the mountains in Colorado. I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what you should be doing when we're talking about details of the show. But listen, this is the day I met Dr. L, and I know she's going to get a laugh out of this because I get a laugh out about it every time I talk about it. So Joe DeSena calls me about 2 a.m. He's like, Yancy, meet me down in the lobby of the Courtyard Marriott. You're going to take Cal Fussman and I through a workout. I get there at 4:30 and I take him through about a 2-hour workout. We're wrapping up and Joe's like, jump in with us. We're going to go meet this psychologist. She's got to do some fixing. She's got to fix Cal and I. She's got a plan. So I'm like, let's go. We go into Dr. L's office. Beautiful little office. Just like this warm office. I felt right at home. Well, I'm behind the camera. And the camera starts rolling. And Joe and Cal are a hot mess. They're fighting and bickering. Joe's talking about, I can fix anybody in 30 seconds. Cal's like, no, that won't work. You need 30 minutes sometimes. And she graciously opens up their brain and like just pops them out in her hands and just juggles them like a work of art. Had those two boys she had them like just relaxed on the couch, just doing this. Yes, Dr. L. It was sheer beauty. That was the day that I met Dr. L. And then the next day I was teaching her how to climb a rope at AT&T Stadium when she was racing the stadium race. And we've been good friends ever since. Much love, my friend. Thank you so, so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me. Yes, I love that story primarily because it brings me back to those moments where it's like you meet people who you just know are your people. You're like, oh, these are like my people. They talk my same talk. They walk my same walk. So I appreciate it. I really appreciate both of you for having me on today. I love what you guys are doing. I'm super stoked to talk about all this stuff and dive deep.
Well, Dr. L, especially on the fitness side, again, we keep using this phrase roller coaster ride, because so many people, they stop and start. And, it's interesting. Yancy and I have talked about the topic of motivation for a long time now. And we're talking about Joe DeSena, the founder of Spartan. There's a guy that's not necessarily motivated, but he's very disciplined. I got a chance the last couple of days to spend some time with Joe in the mountains of Vermont. And his first question to us before we all jumped into our tents was, who's getting up with me at 4:15 a.m.? And nobody was raising their hand because I don't think we were motivated or had the discipline to do so. And he was an automatic. So I'm excited about this topic because I think this is something that so many people struggle with. And I wish I had 110% compliance with discipline. So I'm really interested in your take with this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think to go back to what Yancy was saying in the very beginning, that he and I were talking about sort of what we were going to talk about just a little bit and sort of giving me the headline of maybe what we would explore today. I was thinking to myself, motivation and discipline, what are those about? I mean, one of my favorite words is getting curious. And so whenever I come on a show like this, or whenever I'm just sort of thinking about it myself as a psychologist, it gives me an opportunity to dive deep into it myself. And I think one of the things that I want to start with as it relates to discipline is that I feel like, and this is also the same with motivation, I feel like there's a big misconception about both, that you go out and you find it, that it's like some relic you find in the land of Narnia. Go find your motivation, go find your discipline. And I think the easiest way for me to explain it to people is that it already exists inside of you. We all have motivation inside of us, and we all have the capacity for discipline inside of us. We just need to find the right vehicle that taps into that. And so for me, when I think about discipline in particular, I think about values, because it's really difficult for us to be disciplined in anything if we don't give a shit about it, right? So for example, I'm not really interested in climbing Mount Everest at all. Not because I don't think it's interesting or cool. It's just not something I want to do. So, if someone were to ask me well, where's your discipline in training for Mount Everest? It would be really hard for me to find it within myself because I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. And I think as it relates to fitness in particular, one of the things that I think people miss often is the opportunity to ask themselves well, why does this matter to me? Why does getting fit matter to me? Why does, making sure that I'm faster next time matter to me? And it has to go beyond because it's cool, or because I'd be able to post it on Instagram, or I'd get a good podcast out of it. We have to tune into a deeper value, whether it's integrity or honesty or hard work or grit or honor or family. I want to be fit because I want to be able to throw the football with my kiddo, and I want them to see that I can be out there for an hour. So I think as it relates to discipline, the first thing that I would want people to know is that it's not something you go find. Go find what matters to you, and then your discipline will be activated a lot easier once you've got your value.
I love that you say that, because when we were doing our 5-part series called A Life Fueled by Fitness, our number one tip was first, you have to find your purpose,
Exactly.
And so we're aligned here. We're aligned already with that. And I think, though, the difficulty is a lot of people don't think in those terms, though. It's like they need help. They need a coach. They need somebody like you, to kind of hold their hand. I guess the question I have is like, gosh, for somebody that's really struggling with motivation, how do we get the tools in front of them so that they reach out?
Yeah. So, okay. So one of the things I would say is that, and I love that you went there because I know that there are people who are listening that are like, well, that's great, Dr. L. It's inside of me, but I haven't been motivated to put on my exercise shoes for like months. So what the F are you talking about? I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, so I think one of the things that I would encourage people to really consider, and one of the things that I work with my clients on all the time, whether it's about motivation, discipline, resilience, grit, is to find your data point of in the past when you've done that already or felt that way already. So for example, if we're talking about resilience, I often ask people, what's your RDP, your resilience data point? When in your life have you already experienced resilience and you just didn't name it that? Oh, it was when I was in 11th grade and I got picked last for the kickball team, but I went out there anyway. As humiliated as I went out there and I played kickball, right? So as it relates to discipline or motivation, yes, I think for sure, like hiring a coach can certainly be useful, but I would ask people to even just start a little bit smaller than that and ask themselves, for example, when in my life have I felt really motivated? Right? Mm-hmm. And maybe you have to go back decades. When in my life have I felt really disciplined? And maybe you have to go back years. But once you identify like your discipline data point or your motivation data point for the past of when you felt that way, one of the very first things that does is that it reminds you that you're very capable of that experience, right? So oftentimes, for example, people might come into my office and they might say something like, I've just never been motivated to work out, right? They use that like big overarching statement of never. And so we dig and we dig and we dig. And I just keep asking them, like, tell me one time in your life when you did something physical that was hard for you, right? And it could be even like, well, when I was 13, I, ran a mile around the track in PE or whatever it is. But it's like, okay, but so you're very capable of it. Like you have it already inside of you. So that's the very first step where I ask people to just reflect on their past experience in a positive way, right? With motivation and or discipline. Because oftentimes when somebody feels stuck, what they do is they call up all the times when they haven't been able to, right? Because it aligns with the story that they're telling themselves. So if the story they're telling themselves is I've never been motivated or I'm just not a disciplined person, then they think of all the times when they haven't been disciplined or they think of all the times when they haven't been motivated versus activating like the other part of your brain that actually engages in, let me think of all the times that I was, and then you begin to build confidence around it.
Tell me the R in RDP again. The R stands for?
Well, that was resilience data point. But there's discipline data point. There's motivational data point. It's all about the data points.
I had to ask that again because we're going to be talking about that. That's going to be in the wrap-up show, JC. I love that. So something we consistently and graciously push, and it goes back to one of the main reasons why we started DEKA, because we wanted this low barrier of entry test, competition, race, however you want to look at it. JC and I are always graciously pushing people towards keeping something on the calendar, and we know Joe does as well. That's that Spartan paradox. So for me, that's one of my key motivators. My wife knows that once I'm done with something, I'm going to put something right back on the calendar. And talk to me about what's going on inside my head and why that's so important for all the other people once they have that on the calendar, that you kind of have a little extra motivation. You're a little more fired up and passionate about getting off the couch because you know that event is eventually coming up.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm also a big believer in that. And I think it's one of sort of like, it's a simple thing to do, but it's not easy for people to do, right? Because they can think of any excuse to get out of putting something on the calendar. Oh, 3 months ahead? I don't know what's going to be happening 3 months ahead. Like, I'm definitely not going to schedule anything. It's like when you go to a dentist appointment and they're like, would you like to schedule your next dentist appointment in 6 months? And your response is, I have no idea where I'm going to be in 6 months, but yes, I will go ahead and schedule my dentist appointment, right? So what happens when you put a date on the calendar? There's a few things. The first is, I'm a huge believer that movement sparks motivation. and momentum sparks motivation. So you putting a date on the calendar is actually an element of movement. Like you're doing something. Even if you're like, it doesn't necessarily mean you're physically moving your body, right? But you are engaging in the process of actually moving yourself forward, even if it's in your mind, because you're putting something down and you're doing something. And I think oftentimes people have this backwards, and I know that Joe talks about it too, sort of this idea that like, I have to wait until I'm motivated to do something, right? It's kind of this similar to the Spartan paradox. Like I have to wait until I'm fit to put something on the calendar. Mm-hmm. And what we're saying is, no, you put something on the calendar and that motivates you. The same is true for movement. Like if you don't feel motivated right now, that's fine. You don't have to actually even be motivated for the event that you're going to put on the calendar. But once you have it on the calendar, you've actually engaged in a first step. And what do we say? Sometimes the first step is the hardest step. So I think that's one thing that I would encourage people to just sort of consider is that when you're putting something on the calendar, you're making a declaration of some kind of movement. Okay, I'm doing this, even if you're really not sure whether or not you're going to do it. The second thing that I would say is that accountability can be it can be our worst enemy sometimes because we don't always love accountability, but in essence, it can also be our best friend. And so when we've written something down and we've put it on the calendar and hopefully we've shared it with somebody, even if it's our wife at home, it provides us with an element of accountability. Like, oh, I'm actually going to do this thing. And what's the best way to say this? Like social viewing, other people having a view on your life, even again, if it's just your wife or somebody close to you, can be a motivating factor. When we know that other people know that we have something to do, we are more likely to do that thing. And data has shown this, research has shown this, that when other people know that we've got something to do, we are more likely to do that thing. And so that's why, for example, just even simple like work things, I'll say to my husband when we start our day and say, what does your day look like? The things that I usually don't want to do the most are actually the things that I start with, because I know at the end of the day, he'll circle back with me and say like, hey, how did that recording go? When I'm like, oh, I really didn't want to do it. He'll circle back and I've done it. So I think that other piece is really important, which is like the accountability piece of things. And then I think, the last part is, and this goes a little bit to writing things down, right? So like not just actually getting things necessarily on a calendar, but like writing it down with your hand or putting it up on the whiteboard that your home might have, or the chalkboard or whatever it is where people see it, and again, holds you accountable in that public way, is that when you write stuff down, it etches itself into your brain in a different way than if you just think about it. It makes it more concrete. And when things are more concrete, they're in so many ways like more acceptable, more attainable. When things wrap around in our head all the time and it's not something we write down, it can play mind games with us. Talk about bumping up your mental game, right? It's why journaling can be so useful, because when you take what's in your head and you put it in your hand, you can really begin to evaluate like, oh, is what I'm thinking in my head reasonable? Oh my gosh, this is the most unreasonable thing on the planet. But when we also write down a goal, and data and research also confirms this, when we write down a goal, we're more likely to complete that goal. We're more likely to move towards that goal and take the steps necessary to do it. So I think that those are like three elements that are really important about that paradox.
Can I admit something? So,
of course, I'm a psychologist. You can admit anything.
Okay, I'm going to lay on the couch here for a second. I
get everyone there, Jarod. Eventually, I get everyone there.
I got back from Jacksonville after a huge event, 5 days. Yancy was there with me. And then the next day, turn around, we go up to Vermont, management offsite retreat. We're spending time outdoors, which was great, but you're not getting a lot of sleep. I got back this morning from Boston, and I don't usually take a nap. Okay, I fear the nap because I wake up even more tired, during the day. But I took a shower, I laid down for a second. Next thing I know, I woke up just freaking out because I didn't know what time it was. And I warned Yancy. I said, "Gosh, man, I just do not have energy today. I was really demotivated." But I'm listening to you, Dr. L, and I'm not just getting motivated. I'm getting fired up. So this is better than any energy drink or anything that's going to spark a blast of energy. But I do have a question though, because these are all great points for motivation. How do I look at motivation or all these sparks of energy that are going to get you to do the things that you have to do or want to do. But when does it transition into that discipline to where it just becomes part of your daily life, your daily routine?
Yeah. Through like consistent practice and action. I mean, that's really the thing that I would say is that, in so many ways, like discipline really is the action of following your own rules, right? Or when we discipline someone else, right? In so many ways, like we use that word to say like, I'm going to discipline you because you're not following the rules. So when we discipline ourselves, it's about action, following our own rules. And the way that we integrate that into like the fabric of who we are and the DNA of who we are is through consistency and is through commitment. And it is through, the uncomfortable sometimes. I mean, certainly, for example, I know Joe, I know both of you know Joe, like he doesn't always want to get up at 4 a.m. and do his exercises, but he does them, So I think the thing about discipline too is that like, it's not, discipline is not necessarily wanting to do something. It's doing it anyway. And it's that consistency that really though allows it to sort of more and more be etched into what you do and who you are. The other thing that I would say about discipline, which I think is really important, especially for athletes, is that oftentimes when we talk about motivation and we talk about discipline, we use it in the way that we're talking about like, how do you get stuff done? How do you move towards your goals? And so sometimes it's sort of associated with like speeding up. And I think oftentimes actually where we need the most discipline is to slow down. Right. And especially as athletes, one of the things that I've noticed in working with like elite and professional athletes is that having the discipline to slow down can be one of the most difficult things. And like, I'm not a professional or elite athlete, but even today on my run, when Yancy called, I was actually doing zone 2 training. And so my little watch, because I was like getting myself fired up, and usually when I'm on the phone, I run faster. And so my heart rate started speeding up and my watch started beeping. That was like, you're out of the zone. You need to slow down. And I even thought to myself in that moment, like, okay, I need to have the discipline to slow down because my body feels so good, like running fast. I love doing it. Mm-hmm. But in order for me to have the discipline, I have to engage in the action of following my own rules. And my own rules right now are to stay in zone 2, to have this slower heart rate. And so I think for individuals who are listening, like I really want them to consider that part of things, which is how do you have the discipline? Where do you implement the discipline to slow down? Because I know I can sense, I know Yancy, Jarod, I know I just met you, but like I know that we are all like go, go, go people. Like our energy is always at 11. But you also have to have the discipline to slow down if you're truly going to optimize your life experience.
I have, because I know your backstory and your love for movies like mine, and you grew up in an amazing childhood around movie festivals. Jarod, it's a cool story. We can talk about it at a different time, but we both love movies. They commonly call them motivational movies. I think there's movies that have provided me with discipline. Tell me your top couple motivational / discipline movies. I gotta know.
Oh my gosh, that's an amazing question.
Because you love movies as much as me, my friend.
Okay.
We're gonna be talking about that question after this is done, Yance. I like that one.
Okay, so I know immediately because it's my favorite movie of all time. Some people have heard of it, some people haven't. It's like a super 80s movie, early 90s. Have either of you ever heard of the movie Rad? The BMX racing movie?
I don't think
I
so.
haven't. I
Rad?
I'm
haven't.
sure you haven't, because
I
it was one of
love
those
it.
movies that nobody watched. But it's all about this kid who BMX races like just for fun, and then this big competition comes to town. And they like open up the competition to a few local boys, and he decides he's going to try. It's called Hell Track. I mean, now that I've said it,
Oh
you
my God.
have to watch it.
Oh, for sure.
And he, this little local boy, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but we all probably know what happens. It starts to move towards the competition and go in the competition. And it really sort of in so many ways, like has to challenge some ideas of what the future means for him, like the whole stuff, right? Like all the stuff about the hero's journey in so many ways. But that to me, I mean, that movie, when first of all, I listened to the soundtrack right now as a 41-year-old woman, and during my 2-mile time trials is when I listened to that soundtrack, because it totally reminds me of like, I need the discipline. I have to implement the discipline at this point to get done. And this kid, Crew from the movie, like got done. And so for me, that is 100% my favorite discipline movie.
Rad.
I love
That's so
that.
rad.
I know. Just wait. When you Google it, you'll be like, what? What? I mean, Dr. Ellis had exposure to like the best movies on the planet. How on earth is this her favorite movie? But I'm telling you, watch it and it could change your life.
JC, her parents literally put on movie festivals. I mean, it's amazing. I was just like, she's telling me the story, and I'm just like at the edge of my seat, like, tell me more. So, how old were you when you first watched Rad?
I mean, probably like 11. Yeah.
Love
like
it.
it was old school. And I still have, I mean, first of all, I have the poster. I have the VHS tape still. Like it's a little bit of an obsession.
Good stuff.
But yeah, and I guess, it's funny because it's funny that you mentioned my parents. I mean, my parents were very disciplined people. And so, I watched a lot of what discipline was like. And I guess that's the other thing I would say about both discipline and motivation is that, again, they already exist inside of you. But if you're having a hard time figuring out how to tap into them through your values, through things like putting something on the calendar, be around other people who are motivated and disciplined. And that is contagious. Like there's no way to be around those people consistently and not be impacted by that. So, when I look at, for example, my parents, I mean, my dad started his career literally bicycling from movie theater to movie theater with 35 millimeter rolls of film in the back of his bicycle to do what he wanted to do. So, when it comes to discipline and motivation, you've got to ingest the content of other people to be inspired.
Oh, I love you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Oh, you guys are the best. Thank you.
I love that. I loved what you said. You got me thinking too. I feel like that was a wrap with what she just said. But
Yeah,
I think what you got me thinking and reminding me, Dr. L, was for years I was thinking about rituals. Rituals in all parts of my life. What are those rituals that I have to really stay disciplined to on a daily basis in all aspects. So it could be the physical, it could be the mental, how I wake up in the morning matters. I used to have a 5-step plan. I wake up before my feet hit the floor. I ask myself, who am I going to be today?
Yeah.
And then when you were talking about movement, I need at least 20 minutes of movement, and it could be anything. It could be stretching. It doesn't have to be, going for a run, but how that morning ritual was the preparation of how I was going to attack the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
totally.
Man.
Well, and I also think too, going back to the data points piece, like one of the things, for example, if someone says to me, I just don't feel like I have much discipline. Like a very simple question is, do you brush your teeth every day?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, well, yeah, because if I didn't, that'd be gross. And it's like, that's discipline.
Yeah.
You're putting action in, right? Like you're creating consistency. And so I think it's like with some of these things, we talk about them sort of like as if they're outside of us, and they're within us. We just have to tap into it when we feel like we're lost and not doing things the way we want them done.
Yancy, we need a dose of Dr. L each week, man.
I knew this was going to be one where I want like 2 hours.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I'm available anytime.
We'll
Get
have
you both on the couch.
Gosh, you just nailed it. And you know what was cool about it too is just you say it so fluently, but it really validated some of the points we even stated on the fitness piece, the 5-part series. You said some things like right at the end there, you know, you got to be around people that are motivated, you know, and one of the episodes was all about finding your tribe.
Yep.
Totally.
You know, to stay engaged. So
Yeah.
some
I mean,
awesome
it's really
points.
interesting because definitely in my work with clients, like one of the things that is hard for people, but that is really necessary, is taking a look at, you know, who is sitting on the tire that you're dragging, you know, and like weighing you back and holding you back, and creating weight for you as you're trying to move forward, because we all have those people in our life. And it doesn't mean that we necessarily need to say goodbye to them. But it does mean that we need to make sure that we infiltrate our community and our support system with the people who do lift us up and motivate us, for sure.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Yancy, you were right on spot, man, with Dr. L. She's awesome.
She's the rock star.
You know, just to recap, well, I've got a couple of things I wrote down. What are a couple of things that you wrote down as far as go ahead.
What's your DP score, brother? What's your data point score? I love that when she says, you know, find your data point when you felt that at one time in life when you felt that way before. Go back to that moment. I love that. And I gotta say, dude, the first thing I'm gonna do tomorrow is I'm watching Rad with my son, and I want to go to Hellcat track on my BMX, brother.
Of course you do, man. I'll have to talk to Adina about that one. I don't know if I'll convince her to watch Rad, but maybe I'll watch it when she's.
I got a 10-year-old that's gonna love it.
You know, the one thing that I think really stood out for me, and there was a bunch of notes, you know, aligning with your values and, you know, again, finding your why and your purpose for motivation. But the one phrase that I really liked was accountability is your best friend.
Yes.
That, you know, and it's true. You know, it's like when you have to be accountable to your friends or to yourself, like that's the driver, you know? And I just, to me, that's a quote that's going to stick with me. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to put that one up on the bathroom mirror, man.
Yeah. And one more thing, doesn't it feel good when the psychologist says the power of what we talked about in our tribe, hang around those disciplined people and they make you better. It's you and I can say that all day long, but when the pro says it, it just feels good, man. It packs a little more punch, right?
Yeah, she definitely went to school longer than we did.
Yeah.
Hey,
Good
listen,
stuff, man. I enjoyed it, brother.
Yeah, I'm excited about this 4-part series. I enjoy doing these with you, and I think we're gonna have some fun with some of the experts that we're gonna have on the show. And hey, man, it's 4th of July weekend. I'm gonna take your quote: drive fast and take chances.
Let's go.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by Gone Rogue high-protein chips. Visit Amazon or GoneRogueSnacks.com and use the promo code Spartan25 to get 25% off. Thanks for listening to this episode of the DEKA Series on Spartan Up Podcast. Spartan Up is your partner in resilience for mind, body, and spirit. We're here 3 days every week. Tuesdays, you can find Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan, interviewing biohackers, business leaders, authors, and athletes. Thursdays and Saturdays, catch episodes from our DEKA, Endurance, Trail, Combat, and La Ruta series. Do you know someone who needs a little nudge? Maybe they could use some motivation, tactics to be stronger, healthier, happier, more successful. Tell them about our show. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. We want to know who's watching and who's listening. Thanks. See you next time.